Hey guys, my name's Ali and welcome back to my channel, Mindful Living. I'm back with a brand new video today where I'll be showing you guys a quick little garden harvest on a few of my plants. I've been growing on my balcony since early spring, and of course, harvesting my plants is one of my favorite parts of the growing process. I love challenging myself every year to grow as much produce as I can, and I'm doing that with very limited space. I live in an apartment building where I have an 84 square foot balcony. If any of this interests you as well, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss any of my future gardening or recipe videos. The first plant I'm harvesting here today is my cucumbers, and this is a Bush Champion variety. These cucumbers grow fairly large. They reach about 10 to 12 inches in length. This is the size I like to harvest mine at. Avoid waiting too long to harvest your cucumbers, as if they are left too long on the plant, they can become bitter tasting. Okay, next up is my beans, and these are wax beans. They're actually a golden yellow wax bean. Harvest your beans when they're young and tender, and that's going to be when they have the best flavor. So they should be about this size and as thick as a pencil. Moving on to kale, I like to harvest my leaves fresh whenever I want to use them, and I recommend you guys do the same. You can do the cut and come again method here, which is when you harvest the outer leaves that are larger and leave the new growth still in the middle. Harvesting your kale this way ensures that you get multiple harvests throughout the season. Kale grows back rather quickly, so within a few weeks you'll have even more kale for you to harvest. So here's my first little harvest here. I have my fresh kale, 2 cucumbers, some yellow beans, and some chives I harvested for another recipe. You can store your cucumbers in the fridge for up to a week. I like to store mine in my vegetable crisper drawer. My kale I like to harvest and eat fresh, like I mentioned earlier. And green beans you can also store in the fridge for up to a week, but again, always harvest and use your stuff fresh if you can. Okay, I'm back outside now and I'm going to harvest a few of my tomatoes that I've let ripen on the vine. Here are a few of my Rutgers slicing tomatoes. These grew to a fairly good size, however, I did think they were going to grow a little bit bigger, but regardless, they still tasted great. Next to it there, I have some Roma tomatoes that are ready. Personally, I love vine-ripened tomatoes. I think they have the best flavor, and they're definitely one of my favorite things to grow in my balcony garden. And yeah, that's the harvest I got off my 2 plants today. I got 7 tomatoes total in this one harvest here. Next up, I am harvesting my Cayenne Peppers. This plant was so prolific, it grew tons of peppers. I would say I harvested at least 20 or more. I waited for them all to ripen to this beautiful red color. I've already used all of my peppers. I actually decided to make some homemade hot sauce, so stay tuned for that video coming on my channel in the next few weeks. Next up, I'm going to harvest a bunch of strawberries. There are so many here that are ready to be harvested on my plant. Wait until your berries are ripened all the way around the fruit, not just on one side. And I like for mine to turn this bright red color. You guys can see a few berries there that I'm skipping, and that's because they're not perfectly ripe. Personally, I think it's worth it to wait for that bright red color, as it's gonna give tons of fresh, delicious flavor that you want from your strawberries. These are everbearing strawberries, and I prefer to grow those over the June bearing, as everbearing will give multiple harvests throughout spring into the fall. Moving on to radishes, here I am harvesting my cherry bell radishes, and I was shocked with just how fast radishes grow in the garden. This is my first time growing them, and they took about 30 days from seed to harvest. Because they are a root vegetable, you want to give your radishes a really thorough wash after you harvest them. The greens are edible on your radishes, so you can also enjoy those as well if you like the flavor. You can add them into your salads just like you would with other leafy greens. Next up, I'm going to harvest a bunch of my herbs, and I'm starting with rosemary. I'll just be trimming a few pieces off my plant and letting it continue to grow. Next to it, I have some thyme, and this is actually a lemon thyme, and it's growing out of control, so I'm gonna harvest quite a bit of this and cut it back so it can continue to grow into the fall months. That way I can get another harvest off my plant before the end of the season. Next to my thyme, I have lots of oregano growing, which I'm going to harvest quite a bit of as well. Don't be afraid to take a decent amount of your herbs here like I am, and they will grow back. I'm taking the larger leaves, and within a few weeks I'll have even more for me to harvest. Next to it I have my parsley, which I'm going to be harvesting to use fresh. I love adding this into salads or as a garnish, whereas the other herbs I prefer to dry them. Last but not least is my basil. I love making fresh homemade pesto, and I plan to whip up a huge batch of this. When harvesting basil, you want to take the top growth so that your plant will continue to push out new leaves towards the bottom. This makes for a bushier basil plant and more harvest. It stops it from going to flower, which can also change the taste of your basil. I'm back in my kitchen now and showing you my full harvest here of all of my herbs, radishes, tomatoes, peppers, and strawberries. I harvested a lot of herbs here, which I plan to hang and dry so that way I can use it throughout the winter months. Lots of fresh berries there, tomatoes, and all my cayenne peppers, which I made into hot sauce. Even though I grow my produce organically, I always give everything a good wash before I enjoy it. And make sure you're storing your produce properly as well. Tomatoes should be stored on the counter at room temperature and not in the fridge. Radishes I like to wash and take the leaves off of before I put them into the fridge. And I make sure to thoroughly wash all of my herbs. I use a salad spinner to do that, and then I lay them all flat onto a tea towel and let them air dry. This usually takes a couple hours, and from there I'm going to be hanging them upside down with string in a cool, dark place until they all dry and transferring them into airtight containers. Here is my homemade pesto, which I made right away after harvesting my basil. Also makes it taste even fresher and full of all of that delicious basil flavor. I hope if you guys enjoyed this harvest video today that you'll leave me a like, make sure to leave a comment down below, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any of my future videos. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in my next one.